Hello guys and welcome back. So we have created two components, right? And they're also constructed in here. We have given them the hierarchy. We also made our head mesh visible. We can now move on to really give it some visual. Now that can be done. That's arguably you can do that in the editor here. You can say, okay, I just gonna give it a static mesh like the shape sphere or something. But we can also do that in our coding. Okay, so because we're doing coding, let's do that all in coding, right? I'm gonna go to the CPP file, right? After attaching the head, we can start giving it some visual, right? Let me type in static. Probably don't need to have static because I need more explanation on that. Okay, so I'm gonna say constructor helper f object fender. Okay. Oh, I have to create a variable for that. Use static mesh. Okay. And then, oh, not that. I think, yeah, this is a class type. Sorry. This is a class type. So constructor helper of object fender, and then use static mesh. Okay. Mesh for head mesh, right? And then I can create two parentheses and then column to finish that. And then let's see, what do we need? Object to fend, and then probably don't need that. I think I can just type in the text. So let me do that, text, and then column, right? It's happy about that. So let's explain this, right? So what we're doing here is we're creating a variable called mesh for head mesh, a variable. This is the variable name. And then this is the type of the variable. Now you're saying, what is this thing, right? Why is it so long? Why does it have all those things? Why, right? So that's just something that requires a lot of explanations. Okay, so first of all, before those two column constructor helpers, this is just a namespace. Okay, so you don't have to worry too much about that. It's just basically saying, okay, this belongs to this group of things, and then after that, object fender is the actual type name. It's called object fender because it's able to find an object for you. But it can find any type of different object, right? To be more specific, then you have two angle brackets and you type in the type of the object you're finding. Okay, so basically, long story short, we're creating a variable type called object fender. It's finding this specific type called static mesh. Okay, and this object is part of this group of objects or functions called constructor helpers, right? Now, to be more specific, this is something we call template class. Let's go to definition here. That's one of the powers of our engine. You can go to the actual definition of those various classes built for you, right? Oh, you know what? This is actually part of the structure, and inside of it, you have another smaller one. Okay. Anyway, so you can see this is something we call a template, meaning that it's able to morph or be different things based on whatever you typed in here as the type of the template. Whatever in the angle bracket will define what's happening inside. Right, so it doesn't know what do you want to create. So it's going to give you a template here. And you can define the details of what this thing that will be used internally. Right, that's what's going on. Something we call template programming, and that's very popular in some of the C++ programming practices. But long story short, right, we're creating an object fender that's finding a use static mesh for us. It's part of constructor helpers, right? We give the variable a name called mesh for the head mesh, and then here we specify the details about this variable. In this case, we're specifying the directory, right? Where do we find this object? And that's when I need to go to the editor and find it. So I'm gonna go to the, I think it's in starter content. We have some already existing shapes, and then I can use the shape sphere here. So let me right click, and then there's a copy reference down there in the right click menu, copy reference, right? Once that's copied, I can go to the text and then right click. We can say paste, or just Control V, right? Control V to paste it. Now I need to delete a few things. Of course, I don't need to say it's a static mesh. I have already set that in here. So I'm gonna get rid of that. And then there's also another small quotation, single quotes. We need to get rid of that too. Okay. And then we need to get rid of the dot shape sphere, because that's just the extension there. We don't have to specify that. Okay. So basically we're telling it to find in our game, right? Find the starter content folder. There's a shape folder, and inside of it, find shape sphere, right? Okay. Now I need to know if it does find it or not. I'm going to use something called a if statement to do that. So let me type in if, and then parentheses, and then curly brackets. Okay. And inside of the if parentheses, I'm going to type in mesh for head mesh dot succeeded. Okay. And then I can start using it. So what this means is that it's going to check if this thing is true or false, right? So whatever in the parentheses will be an expression you put in that can be evaluated into two possible results, true or false, right? In this case, we're checking if the mesh for a head mesh actually loaded this file successfully. So succeeded will give you that information, right? This will return something we call a Boolean variable here. If you hover the cursor here, you can see it's returning a Boolean, right? So if we succeeded, the return Boolean will be of having the value true. If it's not successful, then the return value will be of still the type of Boolean, but it's going to be having the value of false. A Boolean can have two possible values, true or false, right? It's very common in programming, like we use that to branch out to different things based on if something has succeeded, something exists, or if a mathematical expression is bigger than 0 or smaller than 0 kind of thing, right? We use things to pass those things into a if statement, and then based on if this thing is true or false, we do the things in the curly bracket or not, right? So if this is success, whatever written in those two curly bracket will be run. If this is not successful, then we'll just skip over what's in the curly bracket and keep on going, right? That's what's going on in here. Okay, so of course we need to check if we have loaded it successfully, right? If that's true, then we can assign that to our head mesh. So we can say head mesh dot set static mesh. And here we pass in our static mesh, which is going to be mesh for head mesh that we load in dot object. The object it has found. Okay, now let me save this. Now back here to our editor, we can also compile it here by clicking on the compile. Let's see now how our model now is having a sphere now. Right, let me get rid of all these things. And if you go to the C++ class, C greedy snake, you can see now it does appears to be having a sphere. Pretty cool, right? Now before we move on to the next video, let's just set up a few things about this sphere. I'm going to delete it. Okay, here in the CPP file, I can say, okay, head mesh. I want to make you to overlap with other things so I can detect overlapping events. I can do that by saying set collision enabled. Did I type that wrong? Collision enabled. Okay, parentheses, and then semicolon to end the statement. And then you can type in a comma to see what it does take. You can see it does take something called eCollision enabled. So I'm going to type in that. Enabled. Then column, and then there's a few of different options. I'm going to go for query only. Right. So what this means is that we're going to set the head mesh to be collide with others, but only query the collision, only query it. Don't do physics interaction, don't bounce back and do those kind of things. Only query things like overlapping, right? It's colliding, but I'm not going to really do the collision thing. I'm just saying that I'm querying that, right? That thing is something I need to know. I need to be reacting to those events, but not on a physical way. Okay. Now this is also this is something slightly different. We were saying that this is a namespace. In this case, it is, but it's more importantly, this is the namespace of the type called eCollision enabled. E means enum. Enum is basically a sequence of possible operations or not operations, choices that you can make. In this case, it's for the collision enabled. There's different possible modes, right? If you delete that and do column again, Visual Studio should give you some of the hints. No collision means we're not colliding with anything, or we can say physics only, which only do physics collision but not really report the event. Or we do query and physics, which will do event, will fire events, and also do the physics calculation. Or we only do events, which is type only, query only. So that's gonna be the few options we can do for the head mesh to react to collision in different ways. Okay. And we can also say head mesh. Okay. Set collision object type, and then when it goes to go here and say ECC pong, and then finish that. Basically means what this means is that there are multiple collision types in our engine, right? It can be like just a static mesh in there that's just statically stay there. It can be you can see a whole lot of different things, right? ECC camera, right? This is the camera thing. There's even other custom channels for you to define, or you can also say a few already defined ones like visibility, even a vehicle or pound. Because we are a pound, right? We should set it to pound just to be consistent. Okay, and we can also tell head mesh. Okay, I'm typing it. The period is automatically changing that to an arrow. That's a feature of Visual Assist. For you have to type in dash angle bracket if you don't have Visual Assist. Okay, I'm also going to set its collision response to all channels here to also just do query. That means whoever collide with it, my response to those things will be just fire the overlapping event. Okay. Alright, that's the three things we have to set up. This wouldn't change the visual at all, but this is just some basic setup for the head mesh to be able to collide with other things. Alright, let me go ahead and compile this one more time and just make sure that this goes through, and then let's move on to the next video where we set up some inputs. Okay, see you next time.